Hey everybody, this is Nick Baldwin, and today I'm being joined by UFC featherweight Billy Quarantillo, who is set to take on Shane Burgos at UFC 268 at MSG on November 6th. Billy Q, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely appreciate you taking the time. Let's get into this fight. It's a big one at 145. I think a lot of people think this could be fight of the night, maybe even more than that, maybe even fight of the year at the end of 2021. When they called you and asked, "Hey, do you want to fight Shane Burgos?" How did you react?
Yeah, my manager told me because I already asked Dana White in between, that last fight with Benitez. We're going at it. We're at the Apex. Luckily, Dana White was like right next to me, which I was like, this is, I don't even need to book a meeting with my boss. He's right here. So that's when I was asking him. I was like, listen, I love fighting at the Apex. This is my 5th fight at the Apex. If I go out there and get this win, let's do it at like a stadium with a bunch of fans. And he kind of gave me like that, like the nod, like, handle this fight first. So luckily I went out there and got the finish. At that point, we waited a few weeks and we were hoping for a good matchup at MSG or one of the other stadium fights. And when my manager told me that I was going to be Shane Burgos, I said yes right away. I was super excited. I've been a fan of Shane Burgos's for a while. I've watched most of his fights that he's had in the UFC. So just having this opportunity, Madison Square Garden, top 15 in the world, first time fighting it with a stadium in an arena in 2 years. It's just a dream come true. I'm in a great position and I'm ready to make the most of it.
Does Burgos as an opponent sort of excite you almost more than usual just because, he can finish fights on the ground. He's a good submission guy. Basically, win or lose, he's in exciting fights. You're the same way. Did this matchup just really get you more excited than some of the other ones you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the most excited I've been for a fight. And I noticed earlier on in my pro career that anytime I fought someone that I just thought I was better than, like I just thought I matched up really well against them, those training camps just weren't as intriguing to me. I just felt like I didn't have to push it as much, or subconsciously that I knew I was a better fighter. This fight is the type of fight that gets me excited. It makes me every single day I'm training as hard as I can. I know the dangers that he brings on the feet. He's an excellent boxer. He's got good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, good striking. I know I got to be on my game, and those are the fights that excite me, and those are the training camps that I get the most work done and I elevate the most. So Shane's doing me a favor by being as good as he is. And, come November 6th, I'm going to be ready for the best Shane Burgos, and you're going to see the best Billy Q there is.
So when you say, I can't remember exactly what your phrasing was, but something about not being as motivated for certain opponents in the past, how is that something you've been able to, counteract in some ways? Because, I mean, you've been still putting on great performances in the UFC so far. How do you fight that, in some ways, I guess, a lack of motivation and still perform well?
Well, in the UFC, I've never had that issue yet in the UFC because
Okay.
I felt like everyone at this level has something to bring to the table. And even if I felt like I matched up good with them, I'm still putting on a performance in front of the whole world, and it's still my job. The fights that I didn't feel that were like the ones coming up where I felt like I was already ready for the UFC, and I'm
Right.
fighting guys that I don't think we're ever going to make it there. So for the fights like that, where the guy's not as dangerous, I've always been able to train hard. I've never not had good training camps, and I've never had ones where I'm like, oh, I didn't really train that hard. But for fights like this, where the guy's so dangerous on the feet, he's got such good striking. It reminds me of when I fought Kama Worthy back in the day, where going into that fight, he had like he was like 7-1 with like 6 knockouts, and he was just knocking everyone out. The type of striking where it's like, if you make one mistake against this guy, you're going to get knocked out. That's the type of fight where like I wake up right in the morning and I go right to striking, and I'm paying attention, and I'm doing striking 3-4 times a day, and I'm shadow boxing when I'm at the grocery store, and I'm just a lot more focused because I know the risks that come with it. And of course, signing this new UFC deal, this is the contract I've been waiting for. And it's like this one and the next one. Now we're finally starting to make some real pro athlete type money. So now it's everything I'm doing is as professional as possible and at the highest level.
So if you were to compare some of your wins from years ago on the local circuit to your few UFC wins in the octagon, do you notice sort of in an increase in how good your performance is because of that motivation?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the motivation. It's a lot of stuff. It's, the UFC fights were ones that have come like later in my career. So I think I keep getting better and better, where some fighters, their prime is like 25, 26, 27. I was a late starter. I really started doing MMA when I was like 2021, where I really started getting into it. So that 10 years before you become an expert in something, it took me all those 10 years. And, I'm just getting into my prime now at 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So these next 3 years, I really consider the top of my game, and I'm still getting better because my strength and conditioning has taken off in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm doing new things. I'm setting new, personal records. I'm learning new techniques. I'm doing other stuff that I wasn't able to do back then because I wasn't as experienced. So right now, not only do I have the most experience in the cage, but I've also learned, and I know as much as I've ever known, if that makes sense. And now going into this fight, it's going to be the best Billy Q because of that experience in and out of the cage.
Now, MMA is a young person sport for the most part, but do you think you're the type of guy that can still be fighting at an elite level when you're maybe even 40? Because to a lot of people, you still feel like a prospect in the UFC in this featherweight division, and you're 32. 8 years, not that much time, right?
Yeah. That's kind of always been. I never wanted to fight until I'm like 40, but I still feel and look really young. Everyone always, says I look really young at 32. So right now I'm looking at like a 3 or a 4 year window of keep fighting the biggest names, the most money I can make, and see where it goes. I'm kind of taking it year by year, but yeah, my body feels great. I haven't had any major injuries lately. I've had, one torn ACL, one broken hand. But for the most part, for guys who've been wrestling their whole lives, they've already had plenty of surgeries. Where I haven't gone through that much wear and tear because I only started really training hard when I was like 21. So I'm about 11 years in now, and these next 3 years are going to be super important. So I'm going to make the most of them. And I'm not taking any time off or doing anything besides, trying to pursue this dream of being a world champion.
When you mentioned a few minutes ago that this is the contract you recently signed, is the one you were waiting for. What do you mean by that exactly? Is it just a matter of the dollar amount? Do you feel like you're finally, your worth is where you feel it has been? What do you mean by it was the one you were waiting for?
Yeah, the one I've been waiting for, meaning, so I moved from Buffalo to Tampa in 2010, and that was to pursue that goal of being in the UFC, to do this full time. So my first, I took 11 amateur fights, did really well, didn't get paid for any of them. Then I went pro, making, a few $100s for each fight, moving up in my pro career. That was most of my 20s. And then finally, before I got in the UFC, I was able to sell a lot of tickets and make decent money, but you're only fighting 2-3 times a year. So it's not decent money in terms of, actually making money. It's only maybe 10, 15,000 a fight. So you're really not even making, you're still at like the poverty level, unless, I was working 2-3 other jobs. So what I mean by it's the contract I've been waiting on, this is a contract where if I'm fighting 3 times a year, there's plenty of money, especially if I'm winning these fights. It's plenty of money to do that full time and to not have to worry about a second job, worrying about teaching private lessons. It's the type of money where I can focus just on my main goal, and that's to be a world champion, where most of these 10, 11 years, I'm working 2 jobs. I worked as a server. I worked in a law office. I worked as, a cook. I worked as, a bartender, that type of stuff. And now it's just teaching martial arts, doing martial arts, and, doing MMA commentary, like stuff that I really like to do, as opposed to stuff that I had to do just to do this full time.
What's the feeling like now that you're at this point where you can just sort of do fighting and do what you want? Because obviously the grand goal, the main goal for every fighter is to be the UFC champion. But, before that, a lot of fighters are just working so they can do this full time. That's what they want to get to. That's what they want to achieve. So now that you're there, how good does that feel?
Honestly, it feels good, but there's like that drive. It's driving me even more now because you don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to working at Carrabba's. I always think about jobs that I had that I just hated not because of the actual work that you're doing, but like how people are allowed to talk to you, how your bosses can talk to you, how customers can talk to you, how you got to kind of take it on the chin. The biggest goal for me growing up was always just to work for myself, make a lot of money, enjoy what I do, and have my own free time. So getting to that point where I'm finally able to kind of make my own schedule and make decent money doing it, now there's that huge drive to keep that going and to find other things where I can do this for the rest of my life. And I still have nightmares about going back to being a server and going back to doing what I had to do to get here. So now there was that motivation to get here, and now there's even more motivation to stay here and keep doing big things and keep winning these huge fights. So I don't have to go back to it.
And to that point, do you feel like there's any extra pressure on your shoulders now, just knowing that, hey, I don't want to go back to that job. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And to do that, I got to keep winning these fights.
I wouldn't say extra pressure because I've always held myself to a really high standard. And I remember very clearly doing workouts in like 2010 and doing lifting weights and thinking to myself, all right, dude, you're not making any money right now, but all these reps that you're doing right now are gonna pay they're gonna pay you back when you get to the UFC, when you get these huge contracts. So right now the money I'm making is just money that I earned in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's that money. This is just paying me back when I was broke in my 20s. So there's no added pressure, but there's definitely a chip on my shoulder that, I deserve this money. I deserve this. I put the work in. I earned this. And for someone to come in and try to take that away from me, I just can't let that happen.
And how long ago was it that you had like a non-MMA job, a day job?
Uh, it's been, well, I'm trying to think. So even now, I do private lessons. I teach private lessons. I teach group classes at Crazy Tampa South, my head gym. I do commentary for SFT Standout Fighting Tournament in Brazil. So I've done a lot of MMA jobs. Like I'll
Yeah.
never only have one job. So for the last 3 years, I've always done that. And then it's been I think about 4 years now since, probably about 3 or 4 years since I worked like a regular job where I was working at Carrabba's and working as a server and I worked at a law office for a while and did stuff like that. So it's been a good amount of time, but even when I stopped working those, I wasn't making a lot of money. I was kind of just getting by. So it's been about 2 years since I got in the UFC where I've been able to focus a lot more on this comfortably as opposed to like, I need to do this, I need to do that type situation.
Very cool. I want to talk a bit more about this fight with Shane Burgos. First of all, do you know if this is on the pay-per-view or the prelims? And the reason I ask is because on one of the last UFC broadcasts, it said you versus Shane Burgos was opening up the pay-per-view. If you look at the UFC.com website, your fight's on the prelim. So have you heard as to whether or not it'll be on the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I think I'm 99% sure it's on the main card now. I think that what happened was they put it on the UFC website and then they took the Sean Strickland fight out, so they just bumped everyone up a little bit. And there was a little confusion there, but as far as I know, yes, it's going to be on the pay-per-view. It's going to be the Frankie Edgar Chito Vera fight, me and Shane Burgos, and then the Justin Gaethje fight after that. So super excited about that. I think it's awesome. I think it was a good decision to bump us up. And I like I said, I was just happy to be on the card and to be on the main card now. It's just like a dream come true.
It's some good company with those former UFC champions and legends, hey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good company. Everyone's been asking like, oh man, are you gonna get fight of the night? Or it's gonna be tough with these guys. And I feel like my style always, and especially with Shane Burgos' style too, we're both pretty vicious. So we're both going to go there and try to knock each other out. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to point fight him or I'm going to hold him down or this or that. So I think there's always a chance of a fight of the night. And what I'm really going for is a performance of the night, not taking as much damage, not getting hit a lot, try to avoid some of that. But at the end of the day, if we end up, both end up in the hospital, we end up, beating the shit out of each other, that's something that they're paying me for, and I'm expecting it.
As a New Yorker, what does it mean to you to be part of the first MSG show in almost 2 years, or actually over 2 years?
Oh man, it's incredible. It's when the pandemic first started, I didn't know if we were going to be doing this for another few years. If I was only 1-0 when the pandemic started, so I was hoping that making sure I'm not losing fights and could get cut before the pandemic's even over. So to go 4-1 now in the UFC and to get this opportunity, not only on an absolute dream card, this would be a top 3 pick of like my fight in this venue before you die type bucket list situation. It's a dream come true, and I feel like I've earned it coming off the wins at the Apex and fighting 4 times in fighting 5 times in the Apex total now. I think I've earned it, taking those fights. But now I need to go prove that I deserve this, and I prove that after this fight, it's more arena fights. I'm an exciting fighter, so let's give him some big matchups. Let's give him some fun fights, and let's just keep this thing going.
You're coming off a very dominant win over Gabriel Benitez this past summer, which came after your first UFC loss last December against Gavin Tucker. Is there anything that happened in those, I guess, 7 months or so where you made some drastic improvements in one area? Like, do you feel like the guy that fought Gavin Tucker almost a year ago and the guy that beat up Gabriel Benitez in July, like, are 2 different guys at all?
Yeah, I think those 7 months I did a lot of growing. It was the first loss in the UFC. The first thing I did was I got PRK, like basically LASIK eye surgery. So not only was I up until that point in my career, all my amateur fights, all my pro fights, not only was I either fighting with contacts or fighting with nothing where my vision was terrible, but I had a friend that would basically give me contacts. So he gave me free contacts. So I wasn't even getting like eye exams. He was just sending me the same script. So I don't even know if that was like my right script. So like my vision was nowhere near perfect. Not to make excuses because Tucker might have beaten me either way, but going into the Benitez fight, it was the first time in my career that I didn't have to worry about one of my contacts getting knocked out. I didn't have to worry about not having perfect vision. And then coming off of that loss, I was able to really break down every single thing I did wrong. I was able to nitpick it. It's easier to do when you got that bad taste in your mouth of losing. So those 7 months, I grew tremendously. And then I didn't really get hurt at all. I was of course banged up after a fight like that, but I got right back in the gym and we grew from that fight, as opposed to what I've seen a lot of guys do where they'll take a few months off, get completely out of shape, and then try to get themselves back into shape. We just kept training, kept working out, did some recovery for the first couple of weeks, but then we just started crushing the training camp. And it's been a long, 8-week training camp so far, and we still got like 2.5 weeks left.
Yeah. In that fight with Benitez with perfect vision, I mean, was there a noticeable difference on your part, like even just a distance thing or range or anything like that? Like, could you really tell, like, wow, this makes a difference to have perfect vision?
Well, yeah, I felt sharp. I felt like all my strikes were landing. I was really dialed in. I was focused. I think the biggest thing was knowing that I didn't have to worry about a contact getting knocked out, because that was always, in other fights that I had, like the 2 fights that I had right before that, both times I lost at least one contact. So not only am I getting punched in the face, but my one eye is, the vision's all off, and the other one is kind of messed up because you're in a fight. So it was a lot different than those fights, and just not having to worry about it and everything else that I did in that training camp. I just had a lot of confidence in that fight, and I'm going into this next fight with even more confidence.
This fight with Shane Burgos, as I said off the top, it's a big one because this is your chance to get into the top 15 of the featherweight rankings. Burgos is number 14. Beyond that, though, like maybe on a bigger scale or more of a long-term basis, what do you think is at stake in this fight?
It's just another huge step in the right direction for me. It's something that, like I said, when I moved to when I moved from Buffalo to Tampa in 2010, that was my biggest goal, was to be a world champion. But before that, I knew a world championship to me meant a UFC world champion. So I knew before I could even think about fighting for a world championship, I needed to get in the UFC first. So the first big step was to get in the UFC. And then once I did that in 2019, now it's all right. Now we could really dial it in. And now it's the original goal, the original main goal of being a world champion. So this fight to me puts me one step closer to my dream, which is to be a world champion, is to keep fighting for that world champion. It's another huge payday that it's money that I can just hold on to and keep for the future. But most importantly, it's a chance to prove to everyone that I deserve to be here. I deserve to be in the top 15. It's a great opportunity to get a lot of eyes on me. Some of the casual fans that'll watch this card might not have seen my fight night fights, or, the other pay-per-view I unfortunately lost. So it's a chance for me to prove to myself and to prove to everyone else that I belong and I'm one of the top fighters in the world.
Do you feel like, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, we look back on this fight and say, this is the one that made Billy Q a featherweight contender?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something that I've prepared myself for, that, you go into every fight, you're like, all right, go, how do you match up with this guy? All right. He's not a top guy in the world. So you match up great with him. And now it's like, all right, now you are fighting guys who are the top guys in the world. How are you going to match up with him? What are you going to do to beat this guy? And these are a lot of questions that I believe I'm answering during this training camp. I know how I could beat him. I know what I have to do to beat him. And this is a perfect fight and a perfect spotlight for me to fight for a top 15. It's going to be a big coming out party. It's going to be like, all right, he's, I not only do I get a chance to fight for the top 15, but I get all the eyes in the world on me. Winning this fight puts me in that, all right, now you're fighting for a top 10. Now you could be a fight night main event, co-main event of a, another pay-per-view card. Just things that I've been dreaming about, things that I've been setting myself up for the past 10 years. It's finally coming into fruition right now.
Well, it's UFC 268, Madison Square Garden, New York City, November 6th. Doesn't get much bigger than that. 2 title fights, of course, at the top. Billy, how do you get the job done?
Whatever it takes. People who've seen me fight, they've seen me out-grapple strikers. They've seen me outstrike wrestlers and outstrike strikers. I'm just going in there. I got my strategy. I got my game plan down. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to heart, willingness to take shots and keep coming forward. And whatever it takes to get the win is what I'm capable of doing. Every single thing. I'm going to leave it all in there. If we both have to go to the hospital, if I got to go to the hospital, as long as I get my hand raised, I'm fine with it, because this is my life work going into this moment and this opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of it.
All right, Billy, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it, and best of luck to you on November 6th.
No problem, man. Appreciate you having me.
All right, take care.